What if you never had to get angry again? Not because the world finally learned to treat you perfectly, but because you stopped handing strangers the keys to your nervous system. What if the next time someone cut you off in traffic, ignored your message, or made a mocking comment in a meeting, your body didn't snap like a tripwire but settled like a lake after a stone sinks? Imagine that. The stimulus lands, the surface ripples, and then it clears. No storm, no spiral. Just you intact. Tonight I want to show you a way to make that image real. Not by suppressing emotion, not by pretending to be above it, but by understanding what anger actually is in Jungian terms, and how to reclaim the inner territory it has been guarding all along. Here's the short summary before we go deeper. Anger is not your enemy. It's a messenger knocking on the door of your psychological house, telling you a boundary is threatened, or a part of you is unrecognized. The problem is that most of us don't open the door. We hurl the door off its hinges. We lash out, or we swallow the feeling and call it maturity. And then it seeps into the plumbing of our life as resentment. Jung would say that when emotions flare, something autonomous inside has been constellated, a complex, a living cluster of memory, sensation, and meaning. If you learn how to meet the complex consciously, you don't have to be run by it. In the next minutes, we will explore 3 things: how anger is born in the psyche, why other people seem to have a mystical ability to provoke your worst versions, and how to transform the energy without going cold or becoming a doormat. If you're new here, welcome to Deep Psyche Lab, where we explore depth psychology in simple, living language. I'm glad you're here. If you find this episode useful, tap like so it reaches more people, and subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss the next deep dive. And as you listen, I'd love you to drop this phrase in the comments to seal the intention. I return to center. Let's begin. Think of anger as heat produced by a friction between 2 images. The image of how reality should be and the image of what actually happened. Those images don't live up in abstraction. They live in the body. Your shoulders rise, your jaw tightens, your breath shortens. The organism prepares to defend. In Jungian psychology, this is the moment when an inner figure wakes. Jung called them complexes, and if that language sounds heavy, replace the word with something more immediate. A charged pattern. Maybe it's the abandoned child complex. Maybe it's the disrespected worker. Maybe it's the unseen friend. Each complex has a script it wants to run, a set of thoughts, impulses, and even sentences that feel inevitable once the heat begins. Notice what yours like to say when they wake. Of course, every time. Who do you think you are? I'm done with everyone. A complex talks like a person because, in a sense, it is. A pocket of psyche that has learned to survive. Why do some people trigger you while others do not? Because we do not perceive each other directly. We perceive through the glass of projection. Projection is when an inner image, usually something you don't want to own, gets pasted onto someone else and then treated as if it lives out there. The coworker isn't just late to the meeting. She becomes the irresponsible one who gets away with everything. An archetype that lives in stories and fairy tales in your childhood kitchen. The neighbor isn't just noisy. He becomes the threat, summoning a warrior you swore you would not need. Anger surges because it feels like a cosmic pattern is repeating, when in fact a human being did something specific in a specific context. If you can learn to do this one move, to ask, what image did I just paste onto this person? You will feel the temperature drop. This does not excuse bad behavior. It returns ownership to the only place from which you can act with power, your side of the glass. Anger is so often a mask for grief. This is not a moral statement, it is a physical one. Under the heat, there is usually a softer layer: loss of respect, loss of safety, loss of being understood. The body chooses anger because anger mobilizes. Sadness would ask you to stop and feel, but you can't stay mobilized forever without burning yourself. Jung once noted that what we call destiny is often the pattern of our character unfolding through time. If your character has learned that anger is the only tool that works, life will keep handing you nails. The way out is not to throw away the hammer. It's to build a toolbox and then choose consciously. Anger can be one tool among many, not the default. Let's make this practical with an image. Imagine you are a lighthouse. A lighthouse exists for storms. It does not argue with the sea. It doesn't send letters to the waves asking them to behave. It turns, it shines, it stays. People will come with their weather systems. Some will arrive in a mist and leave you barely damp. Some will arrive as a hurricane. Your job is not to perfect their climate. Your job is to keep your lamp lit so that ships that want to navigate can do so. When you hold that image, lighthouse not lifeboat, you'll feel the subtle difference between helping and being hooked, between engaging and getting entangled. There's a phrase I want you to try on the next time you feel heat rising. It has 3 parts and takes maybe 15 seconds. First, name the heat. Say quietly to yourself, anger is here. Not I am angry, because that fuses you with the state. Anger is here, as if you're noticing weather. Second, locate the heat. Where in the body does it live? Throat, chest, gut? Put a hand there if you can. The body likes to be acknowledged. Third, normalize the heat. Say, this is a valid signal. You don't have to act yet. You are letting the messenger inside. Those 3 steps, name, locate, normalize, bring the prefrontal cortex online and interrupt the automatic script. In Jung's terms, the ego turns toward the complex and stays in relationship instead of being possessed by it. It sounds simple, it is, but simple is not the same as easy. It's a practice of a few seconds, repeated tens of thousands of times. Let's look at the common situations where anger takes you hostage. One is disrespect. When someone talks over you, forgets your contribution, or uses a condescending tone, something ancient may rise. Perhaps as a child you learned that being loud was dangerous, or that being visible invited criticism. The complex that formed to protect you may have 2 equal and opposite moves: disappear or explode. Neither actually gets you respect. What works is a boundary delivered from the center rather than from the edge. The edge is where panic lives. The center is where your values live. A sentence from the edge sounds like, "You always do this. You never listen." A sentence from the center sounds like, "I would like to finish my thought before we move on." Same situation, different locus of control. From the center is not icy. It's precise. Another trigger is injustice. You see someone cheat, betray, manipulate. Anger arrives with horns and wings. The archetype here is the warrior, and it is holy. But when the warrior fuses with the judge and the parent all at once, you forget your actual scope of authority. You start setting fire to every room because a match lit the curtain in one. Jung observed that instincts are archetypal, broad rivers with multiple channels. The warrior has a sword and a shield and sometimes a salve. Choose the right instrument for the moment. You can say no. You can say stop. You can say this is unacceptable. You can gather evidence. You can exit. You can expose. But you can do so from alignment rather than adrenaline alone. When people say, "I want to never get angry," what they usually mean is, "I want to be able to choose my instrument even when my heart is pounding." That is achievable. Then there is a subtler kind of anger. The resentment that builds when your preferences are constantly overridden by your own persona. Persona is the social face you wear, the agreeable teacher, the helpful friend, the unflappable professional. Persona is necessary. It's the ticket to the theater of society. But if the mask becomes glued to your skin, you lose contact with what you actually need, and anger becomes the underground voice of your neglected life. Watch where resentment pools. It marks the places where you have said yes too often, stayed too late, tolerated too much. To never be bothered by anyone, you must become intimate with the quiet muscle of no. Not the angry no, the clean no. No thank you. That won't work for me. I appreciate the invite and I'm going to pass. Someone might be mildly disappointed. That is not danger, that is sensation. Let the sensation move through. This is individuation in miniature, a small loyal act toward your center. Many people confuse composure with detachment. They go cold to avoid heat. But detachment is frequently just frozen anger. It keeps you safe by locking you outside your own house. Composure, by contrast, is warmth with spine. Jung used the image of the self, the organizing center of the psyche that isn't identical with the conscious ego. The self lives like a still point behind your sternum. When you breathe into that place and remember you are more than the emotion moving through, you can welcome anger as an energy to be directed instead of a fire to be feared. Try this when alone. Sit. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 6, pause for 2. As you breathe out, imagine the breath moving down your spine like a river. The river does not chase or withdraw, it carries. After a minute or two, say quietly, "I choose composure." Notice how your body responds to the words themselves. Words are wands. They change the field. Some of you will ask, what about people who truly do wrong? Am I meant to be a saint? No, you are meant to be sane. Sanity says, reality-based boundaries, chosen consequences, proportionate responses. If someone reliably harms you, composure. Gives you access to your options. Draw a line, change the terms, leave, escalate appropriately, protect others. Anger can ignite the decision, but composure carries it out. Consider the difference between a flare and a torch. A flare is dramatic and brief. A torch is steady and useful. Our culture rewards flares. Your life will be built by torches. There is a phrase in Jungian work called withdrawing projections. It sounds technical, but it's an everyday act. When you feel yourself boiling, ask, what family member does this person remind me of? Where have I seen this face before in the theater of my life? If the answer is, this is my older brother, or this is my critical parent, you can say to yourself, I'm seeing two people at once. That sentence alone lowers the spell strength. The second step is to tell yourself the person's actual name and age, to list 3 facts about the current situation, and to identify one thing you don't know. This is Nia. She's 32. She missed the deadline. I don't know if she was dealing with something personal. Facts and humility help the image unstick from the screen. You may still need to address the missed deadline, but you won't be addressing your entire childhood through Nia anymore. You will find that your triggers often cluster around your typology. Jung described psychological types, the ways we prefer to orient our attention and make decisions. You don't need to memorize letters. Just notice your overused muscles. If you are naturally thinking-oriented, you may get angry when others ignore logic and clear systems. The feeling function is under-exercised, so you misread emotional cues as sabotage. If you are naturally feeling-oriented, you may get angry at bluntness. The thinking function is under-exercised, so you misread clarity as cruelty. If you lead with intuition, you may get angry at details. If you lead with sensation, you may get angry at abstractions. The aim is not to abandon your preference, it's to round out the team. When you feel anger at someone's style, test this. Is this a values conflict, a competence issue, or a typology difference? The third one often requires translation, not confrontation. Let's talk about shame, because it is the silent gasoline. Anger is frequently a shield in front of shame. I messed up immediately flips into, who messed me up? To break that loop, you must reparent your inner witness. When you make a mistake, look in the mirror, literally if possible, and say, I can work with this. That sentence is the opposite of shame. It doesn't lie. It doesn't collapse. It commits. And here's the secret. When your relationship with your own errors is kind, other people's errors will stop feeling like personal insults. You'll correct, coach, or choose distance, but you won't feel the compulsion to punish. The urge to punish is the orphaned child of shame. I want to give you a small ritual called the 3 breaths of sovereignty. Use it before a difficult conversation, after a harsh email, or when you wake at 3 a.m. replaying what you should have said. Breath 1. Inhale and say silently, this is my body. Exhale and feel your feet. You are not floating opinions. You are an embodied being. Breath 2. Inhale and say, this is my time. Exhale and feel the present moment, the room, the chair, the night air. Anger often drags you into yesterday or throws you into tomorrow. The present is neutral ground. Breath 3. Inhale and say, this is my choice. Exhale and choose a next small step. Drink water, write 1 sentence, send 1 clean boundary, or decide to revisit in the morning. Sovereignty is a set of micro-choices stacked into a life. You've probably noticed that the people who trigger you most are the ones closest to you. Partners, siblings, parents, colleagues you care about. That's because intimacy turns the amplification up on projection. We expect from closeness what we didn't receive from closeness in the past, and when we don't get it, anger substitutes for a request. If you want to be less bothered by your loved ones, practice requests, not indictments. An indictment Uses always never and assigns motive. You never think about my needs. A request is time-bound and behavioral. On Saturdays, can we plan the day together by 10 a.m. so I'm not guessing? Indictments produce defense. Requests offer a path. This doesn't guarantee compliance, it guarantees clarity. And clarity reduces needless anger because you can adjust to reality, rather than to a fantasy relationship you keep trying to force into existence. Sometimes the hardest person not to be bothered by is yourself. You say you won't procrastinate, and you do. You say you won't text your ex, and you do. You say you won't doom scroll, and well, here we both are. The anger that follows is self-directed and savage. It rarely helps. Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we disown or repress. One of the strangest but most effective ways to stop being bothered by others is to make a practice of befriending your shadow. Pick one trait you judge in other people, selfishness, laziness, arrogance, and find its clean version in yourself. Selfishness becomes self-respect. Laziness becomes strategic rest. Arrogance becomes calm confidence. When you find the clean root of what you hate, your reactions lose their barbs. You can still dislike a behavior, but you won't be haunted by it. There is also the question of tempo. Anger runs at a very fast tempo. It wants to sprint, but most of life-changing work happens at a walking pace. Try deliberately slowing the scene. When someone says something provocative, pause 2 seconds longer than you want to. This isn't submissive, it's sovereign. In those 2 seconds, you can run a quiet checklist. Is this about me? Is this a pattern? Is there danger? What is my desired outcome? People who never seem to be bothered are not unfeeling, they are unhurried. The psyche needs a fraction of a minute to choose a different road. Give it. Many ask, but how do I not absorb other people's moods? The honest answer is that you will feel them. Humans are porous, but you don't have to be pickled by them. Use a basic containment image. Before a meeting or social event, picture a thin, breathable membrane around your body, like the boundary of a cell. Through it, you can exchange air and warmth and information, but you decide what enters the nucleus. When someone's anxiety rushes the membrane, you acknowledge it and let it flow around rather than through. If imagery isn't your thing, try an object, a ring you touch, a watch you adjust. That marks the decision to remain in your own field. Over time, your nervous system learns this shape and holds it without props. Let's work through an example. You're in a group chat. Someone makes a sarcastic comment about your work. Heat flares. The complex wakes, disrespected worker. Projection glues an image onto the person, the underminer. Your script wants to run. Fire back now. You do the 15-second practice. Anger is here. Hand on chest. Valid signal. The temperature drops 2 degrees. You withdraw projection by naming 3 facts. The comment was public, it was sarcastic, and it could imply incompetence. 1 unknown intention. You decide on one of 2 clean options. Respond once publicly with clarity, or move it private with a boundary. You choose, hey, I prefer feedback without sarcasm. If you have a concern, DM me and let's sort it. You don't litigate their character, you address behavior. They might bristle. That is their weather. You keep your lamp. Another example, a family member insists on bringing up a topic you've said is off limits. You're complex, the child with no door. Projection, the intruder. Heat surges. This time the path is boundary plus consequence, delivered warmly. I love being here. When that topic comes up, I leave the conversation. I'll come back when we've shifted. And then you do exactly that. You leave once or twice, calmly. The family system learns the new physics. There is a door. The remarkable thing is that anger quiets, because anger's job was to install the door in the first place. Sometimes anger is a late messenger. You leave, an interaction, get in the car, and only then feel the heat. Your body was doing you a favor. It kept you functional in the moment and saved the processing for later. When late anger arrives, give it a place to land. I like 2 simple containers, the page and the walk. On the page, write the story exactly as your anger tells it. No editing, then write the same story from the other person's imagined point of view. Not to excuse, just to widen the lens. Finally, write a third version from a camera in the ceiling. Only observable facts. Somewhere between the three versions, a right-sized response appears. On the walk, set a timer for 8 minutes and let your arms swing. Ruminate for the first 4. Then for the last 4, speak only in sentences that start with, "What I can do next is..." You will come back with one action rather than 12 grievances. I want to address a paradox. Many people say they want to never be bothered because they equate being bothered with weakness. They imagine a hero who laughs at insults, who remains perfectly serene when lied to, who meets every betrayal with a philosophical shrug. That is a fantasy built in part from spiritual bypass and in part from action movies. Real strength is not the absence of sensation. Real strength is sensation held without collapse. The strongest people I know feel fully and act cleanly. They are slow to ignite, not because they are timid, but because they are tuned. They know what their life is for, so they do not waste their fire on every spark. Now, here is a tool that will sound strange until you try it, the imaginal dialogue. When someone bothers you and you can't get free of the loop, sit quietly and imagine them across from you. Say exactly what you haven't said out loud. Let them answer spontaneously. Don't force it. Let the psyche speak through their mouth. Often you will hear your own disowned truth arrive from their lips. You never asked. You assume I know your limits. You want me to guess. The imaginal is not the same as the real, but it changes the field in which the real happens. Jung used active imagination to bridge conscious and unconscious positions. When you honor what didn't make it into words, your body will relax its need to keep the anger on repeat. Some of you hold anger like a duty. Perhaps you witnessed injustice and promised yourself never to be numb. Bless that vow. Keep it and refine it. Do not surrender your sensitivity. Sharpen your response. You are most effective when you can see cleanly. Try this formula when you're ready to act in the world. Name the principle, name the behavior, name the boundary, name the next step. Respect is the principle. Interrupting is the behavior. My boundary is finishing my point. The next step is I'll speak up and return to my sentence if I'm cut off. That is the warrior with a pen instead of a flamethrower. A word about humor. Anger narrows your perception. Humor widens it. You can sometimes puncture the spell with a light touch that isn't sarcastic. If someone is huffing and puffing over a small mistake, you might say gently, "We've entered the dramatic arts Act 2, and smile. Used sparingly and kindly, humor returns the room to human size. The trick is intention. Are you deflecting because you're scared, or are you inviting everyone back to the present? The psyche knows the difference. It is also wise to befriend fatigue. You are angrier when you are tired, hungry, rushed, or lonely. This is not trivial. It is a law of the body. If you want to be unbothered, guard your sleep the way you guard your bank account. Eat before the hard meeting. Drive 10 minutes earlier than you think you need. Text a friend before you descend into your day. These are not hacks. They are forms of love that reduce the number of times your nervous system has to white-knuckle its way through the afternoon. A lot of what we call personality is simply the body's state repeated across situations. We haven't talked yet about contempt. Contempt is anger's cousin that dresses well. It lifts one eyebrow, exhales through the nose, and calls itself discernment. In relationships, contempt is highly corrosive. If you find yourself slipping toward it, treat it like a smoke alarm. It says one of 3 things. I am not speaking my need. I am staying where I do not respect, or I have stopped seeing the other as a person. The remedy is to do one brave thing. Ask for what you want, leave what you cannot bless, or look deliberately for one humanizing detail about the other person. A hobby, a worry, a person they love. Humanization does not cancel accountability, but it removes the toxin that turns you into what you dislike. If you grew up thinking anger was forbidden, you might need a period of relicensing it. This can be done safely. Put a towel across a pillow and pound it for 60 seconds while you breathe, and keep your words clean of self-attack and other attack. Or do push-ups until your arms shake, or put on music and move the heat out. Then sit. Feel your pulse. Say thank you to the system that mobilized to protect you for so many years. This is not indulgence. It is integration. Once anger knows it has a place, It won't keep crashing your living room to prove it exists. Let me offer you a tiny mantra to use when old patterns rise. You may be old, but I am new. Say it to the complex in the mirror.
You may be old.
You were formed for a different house, a different table, a different decade, but I am new. I can choose now. The psyche responds to respect and firmness. Treat the old pattern like a retired soldier. You bow, you say, "Thank you for your service." You can rest. And then you step forward and act from the person you are becoming rather than the person you had to be. At this point, you may notice the topic of forgiveness hovering. Forgiveness is not forgetfulness, reconciliation, or the removal of consequence. Forgiveness is the decision to stop letting your nervous system pay the bill for someone else's error. You close the account in your body. That might lead to repair. It might lead to no contact. But the anger that kept you tied to the past loosens because you have reallocated its fuel into the muscles you need for your present life. If the word forgiveness is too loaded, use release. I release you to reality. I release me to mine. There is something liberating about understanding that you control almost nothing and nearly everything at once. You control almost nothing about other people's weather, and you control nearly everything about your posture in the storm. The posture of composure is built of micro-movements. Breathe, name, locate, normalize. Boundary from the center. Withdraw projection. Make a clean request. Choose proportion. Slow the tempo. Return to the self. When you practice these, you will still feel flashes. But they will be flashes, not forest fires. You'll feel the old reflex, reach for the matches, and you will smile and put it back in the drawer. If this episode has been helpful, I'll ask you to do two things that also help this work reach the people who need it. First, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm that depth has a place on the internet. Second, subscribe to Deep Psyche Lab and tap the bell so our next conversation finds you. And remember the phrase in the comments, type, "I return to center." It's a small ritual with a real effect. Before we close, here are a few lines you can carry this week. When someone is sharp, be soft but clear. I'd like to continue, and I need a respectful tone. When a deadline is missed, what happened? What's your plan to recover? When a rumor circulates, that's not mine to discuss. When you spiral at night, I can work with this. When you feel the ember, anger is here, valid signal. And then the question that moves you from reflex to choice. What do I want to be true of me after this moment? Let me leave you with an image to return to whenever you need it. You are standing on a rope bridge between two cliffs. Below, the river of everyone else's moods is rushing. Wind buffets your face. The bridge sways. You take one hand off the rope and then another. You bend your knees and widen your stance. The wind does not stop, but you stop fighting the swaying. You begin to move with it. And you understand that composure is not the absence of weather. Composure is learning the dance of the bridge. From here, anger loses its job as your bodyguard. It retires to the background, where it belongs, a sentinel who wakes only when called. If you're still here, it's because part of you is ready to live differently. You can begin now. Choose one conversation to handle with a torch instead of a flare. Choose one projection to withdraw. Choose one clean no. Choose one breath of sovereignty before you answer the phone. Stack these choices. They become a way of being. And then one afternoon, you will notice that someone tried to hand you their storm, and your hand, without thinking, stayed at your side. You saw the wave, you bowed to it, and you remained the sea. This channel is educational and not a substitute for therapy. If anger or conflict is affecting your safety or health, please seek professional support. If the ideas in this episode resonated, drop "I return to center" in the comments so I know you're practicing. Please like this video to help it reach others, and subscribe to Deep Psyche Lab with the bell on for more mind-deep stories and practical Jungian tools. Share this with a friend who is learning to keep their lamp lit. And as always, thank you for spending your time here. It is an honor to walk this labyrinth with you. Until next time, keep your center, keep your lamp, and remember, calm is not the absence of power. Calm is power under direction.